To begin with, I was sort of curious about, since, there were the three X-Men films previously, in which we had Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen playing both your roles, how much you guys looked to those performances and sort of extrapolated backwards in order to get the character for this film.
Right, well, when I sort of first got the job, I obviously got the three films out again and watched them. And at that point I was thinking, okay, should I study young Ian McKellen, his physicality, his voice? And I went to Matthew with that idea, and it was one of I think the first meeting that we had. And Matthew was more interested in me sort of drawing for myself and using my own voice. So we scrapped that idea straight at the beginning. And then I just sort of worked with the comic book and source material available, which was so abundant that I was spoiled for choice in terms of really developing a fully rounded and complex character.
I used Sir Patrick Stewart's performance to do exactly what you just suggested, to extrapolate things and then work backwards. I took the key kind of defining characteristics of his personality, his saintliness, his sensibleness, his egolessness. Wow, stupid words that I'm making up here. And then turned them on their head. So I tried to make him ego-driven, tried to make him a bit of a drinker, tried to make him a little bit of a tail chaser and all that kind of thing. Just to show that he was in a much younger and kind of a more human place before he becomes the saint that he will be.
And irresponsible, yeah.
Yeah, a lot more irresponsible.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, you mentioned that you went back to the comics for sort of inspiration. Were there any particular ones that helped you?
Yeah, there was one story that I basically drew everything from, and it's not mentioned or sort of... it's not at all apparent in the history of the character in any of the films, including this one. But for me, I could really sort of draw all the personality traits that I was looking for in this film. And it's the story between Eric and Magda, who was a gypsy girl that he freed from the concentration camps when he managed to break out himself. And they got married, and he tried to live a sort of normal life, and they had a child, and that child got killed in a fire down to a sort of angry mob. So in retribution, he killed the entire village, and his wife Magda got freaked out about that and left him. So from that story, I could draw a lot of his sorrow, his mistrust of the human race, and just sort of this single-mindedness.
And was it ever difficult for you, I guess, imagining how Magneto goes from that young boy in the concentration camp at the beginning to sort of the man he will become, both at the end of this film and also in the later films?
No, it wasn't difficult at all, because all that information was there. So I could very easily formulate a character because of the history. Usually you have to go off and write your own biography, but there was everything there for me to draw from. And so I could very clearly see his motivations, and his moral compass was very clear to me, and in that was really helpful, the clarity that I could bring to it. From the first scene I knew exactly what this guy's objective was and what he was all about.
And for both of you, then, how would you describe, I guess, the effect that each of your characters has on the other over the course of the film?
I think they help define each other, as they
Most
would be.
definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like, without him, the events in this film and all that too, but without him, he's not going to become the patrician, the sort of, not, he's a very sort of disguised world leader, but he is a bit of a world leader in these next films that we haven't seen yet, and he's a doer of good, he's a servant of the world, and I don't think he is until he meets this guy and is tragically affected by this guy. He defines Charles, I think.
And the mirror of that, absolutely, Magneto wouldn't exist without Charles Xavier, just purely on that basic sort of premise that Eric wasn't aware of the full potential of his powers, like as opposed to sort of manipulating a pistol or a knife. Charles is like, what about, moving that satellite dish over there? And teaches him that, the sort of mechanism that he's been using up to this point is anger and rage. And Charles explains to him that in between sort of that serenity and rage, there's another place. There's a focus there that he wouldn't be able to sort of achieve without that tutelage. So the irony is that that he's sort of in a weird way Charles creates sort of the Magneto character.
You see that in the other movies as well, with like the performance. It plays in, it all works in really well, I think, because Sir Ian McKellen's performance, it's not filled with rage, although you can tell that there is a deep-seated anger or retribution needed by him, and he's happy to harness the rage and anger in other mutants, but he's a leader now. He's sort of found that place where he's calm enough to be able to formulate plans and lead people and operate outside of rage, I think.